The exchange between Jasmine Crockett and Jim Jordan unfolded with the intensity of two sharply opposed worldviews crashing into each other, beginning the moment Jordan pressed forward with his familiar force, insisting that crime in America was spiraling out of control and using what he framed as undeniable data to support his claims. Jordan leaned into a narrative designed to paint Democratic-led cities as collapsing under their own policies, citing selective numbers, skewed timelines, and fragments of reports that supported his argument while dismissing any context that might weaken it. The tone was urgent, almost frantic, as though presenting the issue as an emergency was part of the strategy itself. Crockett listened without interruption, keeping a steady expression that suggested she was not impressed by the theatrics or the attempted dominance of the room, her posture calm in contrast to Jordan's escalating tempo. Once Jordan finished laying out a picture of nationwide deterioration, Crockett stepped in with a precision that shifted the entire atmosphere. Instead of accepting Jordan's framing, she dismantled it by walking through each point with clarity, questioning where the data originated, which years were cherry-picked, and why certain key variables were omitted. Her challenge wasn't loud or emotional, it was calculated, the type of rebuttal that forced the room to stop and reconsider the foundation of Jordan's claims. Crockett pointed out that crime trends fluctuate for dozens of reasons, many unrelated to party leadership, and that presenting one-sided data while ignoring long-term patterns was a tactic designed to shock viewers rather than inform them. Jordan attempted to cut in, but Crockett continued, bringing attention to federal studies, bipartisan reports, and the broader reality that crime had been decreasing in several regions Jordan refused to acknowledge. The tone shifted drastically as Crockett's analysis exposed major inconsistencies, leaving Jordan momentarily without a straightforward counter. Viewers watching the exchange could sense the momentum shifting, with Crockett's calm dismantling of the narrative overpowering Jordan's dramatic framing. The room quieted as Crockett emphasized that truthful discussions about crime require honesty, not manipulation, and that politicians who exploit fear only worsen public understanding instead of helping solve real issues. Jordan, regaining his footing, fired back with accusations that Democrats were soft on crime, but Crockett responded instantly, explaining that advocating for fair justice policies and community support does not equate to leniency but to effectiveness. This section of the debate highlighted not only a clash of data, but a clash of intentions, Jordan pushing a narrative meant to alarm, Crockett pushing a reality meant to clarify. The contrast became more dramatic as Crockett exposed an instance where Jordan had used outdated statistics in a previous hearing, turning the conversation into a broader critique of selective storytelling in political discourse. Tension grew as the room sensed the confrontation reaching a peak, with Jordan raising his voice to assert authority while Crockett remained unshaken, emphasizing clear logic over volume. Crockett concluded her response by reminding the room that real solutions require accountability from everyone, including those who misuse statistics to score political points. Viewers felt the weight of the moment, realizing this was more than an argument, it was a spotlight on how misinformation spreads in real time. As the exchange settled, the atmosphere remained charged, leaving audiences wanting to see how Jordan would attempt to recover in the next phase. For anyone watching, this is exactly the kind of debate that reveals the truth behind political narratives, and if this breakdown helps clarify the reality behind crime, rate talking points, make sure to subscribe because the next part goes even deeper and the coming exchanges escalate in ways viewers will not want to miss. Stay tuned, because the most intense confrontation between Crockett and Jordan is only beginning. As the debate intensified, the next phase unfolded with Jim Jordan attempting to reclaim control of the narrative, leaning into a more combative tone as he accused Jasmine Crockett of intentionally minimizing the seriousness of crime issues across the country. Jordan amplified his argument by highlighting isolated incidents, sensational headlines, and emotionally charged anecdotes that seemed crafted to sway public perception rather than present a comprehensive picture. Crockett listened attentively, her expression steady even as Jordan accelerated his pace, his voice rising with each point as if volume alone could validate his conclusions. When he finished, Crockett responded with a calm but piercing clarity, noting that using individual incidents to define an entire nation's crime situation was misleading and irresponsible. Her response cut through the noise by returning to what the data actually showed, explaining that while no one denies crime exists, the patterns Jordan presented were distorted because they ignored long-term declines, regional differences, and the way certain states under Republican leadership faced similar or worse challenges. This reversal in perspective forced viewers to reassess the story Jordan had been building, especially when Crockett highlighted studies demonstrating that crime often spikes due to economic instability, underfunded social programs, and lack of community resources, not simply political control. Jordan attempted to counter with accusations of soft on crime policies, but Crockett redirected by pointing out how many of those claims were built on mischaracterizations of reform efforts that focus on targeted policing, mental health support, and reducing recidivism, approaches shown to be more effective than outdated punitive strategies Jordan consistently pushed. The tension reached a new height when Crockett confronted Jordan with his own record, noting that his district faced repeated challenges in addressing crime, raising the question of why he was so eager to lecture others while avoiding accountability for his own region's shortcomings. This shift in direction visibly unsettled Jordan, who shifted in his seat and tried to divert the conversation back to his preferred talking points, but Crockett refused to let the issue slide, emphasizing that crime should not be weaponized to score political points or demonize cities based on party leadership. She underscored that genuine solutions require honesty, collaboration, and willingness to examine root causes instead of leaning on fear-driven narratives. Jordan pushed back by accusing Crockett of deflecting, but the argument quickly lost its weight when Crockett effortlessly cited multiple bipartisan reports that contradicted Jordan's claims, exposing how selectively the so-called evidence had been presented in the first place. The atmosphere in the room shifted once again as Crockett's firm but controlled delivery began overshadowing Jordan's increasingly frantic attempts to maintain dominance. Audience members watching the exchange could sense the imbalance growing, with Crockett's points landing cleanly while Jordan struggled to reframe the conversation. At one point, Jordan tried to pivot to border-related crime, a familiar move in heated political debates, but Crockett intercepted immediately by pointing out that conflating border issues with general crime statistics was a deliberate tactic used to confuse viewers rather than clarify reality, and that legitimate discussions require separating the two topics instead of blending them for dramatic effect. This correction visibly irritated Jordan, who leaned back and attempted to regain composure before reiterating that Democrats simply don't take crime seriously. Crockett responded with sharp precision, noting that taking crime seriously means addressing systemic factors, improving support systems, and ensuring police departments have responsible oversight, not repeating exaggerated narratives that ignore underlying complexities. The exchange grew heavier as Crockett challenged Jordan on the credibility of his sources, highlighting several instances where the data he referenced came from partisan think tanks rather than independent, verified agencies. Jordan attempted to wave off the criticism, but Crockett pressed further, asking why someone so committed to law and order relied on information that contradicted expert consensus. The room grew quiet as the question hung in the air, creating a moment that demanded an answer Jordan couldn't easily provide. Instead, he shifted angles, returning to rhetoric about public fear, only for Crockett to call out how fear is often manufactured to manipulate voters rather than reflect actual conditions. Viewers could feel the weight of Crockett's words as she explained how fear-based politics corrodes public trust and distracts from genuine solutions that communities desperately need. By now, the dynamic of the debate had completely shifted, with Jordan appearing increasingly defensive while Crockett remained composed, methodical, and unwavering. As the back and forth continued, Crockett closed this phase of the debate by emphasizing that responsibility and truth must guide national conversations on crime, not selective storytelling or political theater. This left the room in a stunned silence, setting the stage for an even more revealing final portion of the confrontation, where deeper contradictions in Jordan's argument, and a surprising twist, were waiting to surface. Viewers anticipating how Jordan would attempt to recover next were already hooked, knowing the next phase would expose the most critical part of the debate. The final stretch of the exchange revealed the deepest divide between Jasmine Crockett and Jim Jordan as the debate shifted from statistical arguments to the integrity behind how those statistics were used, exposing the central tension that had been building from the start. Jordan attempted one last push to reclaim authority by returning to familiar claims about national decline, insisting that crime was not only rising but doing so solely under Democratic leadership, a point he repeated as though repetition itself could make the argument more solid. But Crockett stepped in with a decisive tone that cut through the rhetoric, walking through a clear explanation of how selective data usage creates false narratives that mislead the public and distort national priorities. She highlighted broader trends showing that crime levels had fluctuated under both parties for decades, often influenced more by economic cycles and societal pressures than partisan control, undermining Jordan's attempt to present the issue as a simple political blame game. What made her final rebuttal sting was how she widened the lens, pointing out that leaders who devote more energy to painting opponents as villains than to solving root causes only contribute to cycles of fear, confusion, and distrust among the public. Jordan tried to interrupt, but Crockett continued with an unshakable steadiness, outlining how authentic solutions require addressing education gaps, mental health needs, community resources, and accountability measures that remain consistent regardless of who holds office. As Crockett spoke, the atmosphere began to shift from confrontation to clarity, with the contrast between grounded analysis and hollow repetition becoming impossible to ignore. Jordan attempted one final pivot, bringing up unrelated grievances in hopes of derailing the discussion, but Crockett redirected instantly, reminding him, and everyone watching, that moving the goalpost is not a substitute for evidence. The energy in the room grew tense as Crockett finished by emphasizing that America deserves truth, not theatrics, and that crime should be tackled with strategies rooted in fact rather than fear. By the time she concluded, Jordan's earlier confidence had dimmed, replaced by an unsettled stiffness that suggested he recognized the narrative slipping out of his hands. The conclusion left the audience with a clear contrast, one side relying on exaggerated fear to score political advantage, the other insisting that honesty, context, and accountability are the only paths toward real progress. This final exchange cemented the debate as one of the most revealing confrontations between the two, leaving viewers with a powerful reminder that the loudest voice isn't always the most accurate, and that truth, when spoken with precision, can dismantle even the most aggressively delivered talking points.